Hey guys, welcome to Sleeping Stone Whispers Crescent Moon. Tonight, we're drifting slowly into the quiet, dusty world of medieval trade routes, where merchants walked for months, caravans moved like whispers across deserts, and the world connected in the most peaceful, unhurried way. This isn't a story of action or noise, but of stillness, long journeys, and the soft rhythm of history unfolding. As you listen, let your mind wander through endless sands, calm oceans, and silent roads under starlit skies. And just relax. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from tonight? Globe showing Europe, Africa, drop your city or country in the comments. I read them all and it's amazing to see this quiet little community from around the world. If you enjoy slow, calming history like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Sleeping Stone Whispers. It really helps the channel grow and brings more peaceful stories your way. Now, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let's begin. Long before the world became loud and fast, before ships roared with engines and roads filled with noise, there was a quieter time, a slower time. This was the beginning of medieval trade, not with grand empires or busy markets, but with simple people, walking patiently along narrow, dusty paths. In those early days, trade did not look like the bustling exchange we might imagine today. There were no great highways, no organized systems, and no maps that could guide a traveler with certainty. Instead, there were only worn trails, shaped slowly over time by the footsteps of farmers, shepherds, and wandering merchants. These paths often began as something very small. A villager carrying extra grain to a nearby settlement, a potter hoping to exchange his clay vessels for cloth, or a traveler bringing salt from a distant land. Each journey was quiet and personal, guided more by need than ambition. There was no rush. People walked at the pace of the sun, leaving in the soft light of morning and stopping as the sky turned golden in the evening. The world moved gently then, and trade was simply a part of daily life, not something separate, not something hurried. In many ways, these early traders were not so different from storytellers. As they moved from one village to another, they carried more than goods. They carried news, small pieces of distant worlds, whispers of places others had never seen. A simple trade might begin with a question. Do you have grain to spare? Can you offer cloth in return? And so, slowly, quietly, exchanges began. There was no money in many of these early trades. Instead, people relied on trust and balance. A sack of wheat for a bundle of wool, a clay pot for dried fruit, each trade carefully considered, each agreement made with calm voices and patient understanding. Over time, certain paths became more familiar. A trader who once walked a route once would walk it again. And then again. Others would follow. Footsteps layered upon footsteps, until the earth itself remembered the way. These paths became the first threads of what would one day grow into vast trade networks. But in this beginning, everything was still small. The roads were quiet. The journeys were long. And the world felt wide and unknown. There were no grand cities waiting at the end of these paths. Only humble villages, where smoke rose slowly from rooftops and life moved in steady rhythm. Yet, even in this simplicity, something important was taking shape. Connection. One village learning about another, one region slowly discovering the goods and customs of the next. It was not sudden. It was not loud. It happened so gently that no one noticed the change as it unfolded. Imagine a lone traveler walking at dusk, his bag light, his steps steady. The air is cool, the sky fading into soft shades of blue and gray. In the distance, a small village waits, its lanterns glowing faintly. He does not hurry. There is no need. Because in this world, time itself feels slower. And as he walks, he becomes part of something much larger than himself, a quiet network of journeys, stretching across lands he may never fully see. This is how medieval trade began. Not with kings or great empires, but with ordinary people, moving slowly through an unhurried world, carrying goods, stories, and the first gentle connections between distant places. So now, as you relax a little deeper, let your mind follow those early paths, soft, dusty, and endless, leading quietly into the story that is just beginning. The quiet paths of early trade did not remain small forever. Slowly, almost without notice, they began to stretch further. What once connected one village to another, now reached beyond hills, rivers, and unseen borders, into distant kingdoms. These were not roads in the way we think of them today. They were dusty, uneven, sometimes nothing more than a faint line across dry earth. In some places, they disappeared entirely, swallowed by grass, sand, or time itself. And yet, travelers knew them. Not by maps, but by memory, by stories, by the shape of the land. A merchant might walk for days, then weeks, and sometimes even months. There was no urgency in these journeys. The road itself set the pace. Feet moved slowly, step after step, as the sun rose and fell again and again. Sand would gather on sandals, wind would brush softly against worn cloaks, and the sound of movement was often nothing more than a gentle crunch beneath each step. Sometimes, a traveler would walk alone. Other times, small groups would form, not out of planning, but out of quiet understanding. Two strangers meeting on the same road, walking in the same direction, choosing, without many words, to continue together. There was comfort in shared silence. The lands they crossed were always changing. One day, the road might pass through open fields, where farmers worked slowly under the sun. Another day, it would wind through forests, where light filtered gently through leaves, and the air felt cooler, calmer. And then, there were the borders. Not the sharp, guarded lines we imagine today, but softer edges between kingdoms. A shift in language, a change in clothing, new customs, new faces. Travelers would notice these changes quietly, adjusting as they moved forward. Sometimes, a simple greeting would be different. Sometimes, the way trade was done would change. But the journey continued, always forward, always slow. Dust became a constant companion. It settled on clothes, on bags, on skin. It rose softly with each step, then drifted back down again, as if even the earth itself was breathing in a calm, steady rhythm. There were moments of rest, too. A traveler might pause beside a small stream, kneeling to drink cool water, or sit beneath a lone tree, letting the shade wrap around them like a quiet shelter. These pauses were not interruptions, they were part of the journey itself. Because in this world, movement and stillness were the same. As the days passed, the distance between places seemed to shrink, not because the world was getting smaller, but because these roads, these soft, dusty paths, were slowly connecting everything. A trader leaving one kingdom would carry more than goods. They carried familiarity. A piece of one place, gently brought into another. And so, even though the roads were long, and the journeys slow, something peaceful was happening beneath it all. Kingdoms, once distant and separate, were beginning to feel just a little closer. Imagine now, a long road stretching endlessly ahead. The sky above is wide and pale, the air warm but gentle. In the distance, faint hills rise and fall like quiet waves. A single traveler walks forward, unhurried, their shadow long in the fading light. There is no rush to arrive. Only the calm certainty that the road will lead somewhere. And with each slow step, the world becomes a little more connected, a little more known, and a little more calm. Now, let your thoughts drift along that road. Soft and endless, as the journey continues. The lonely paths of early travelers did not stay quiet forever. Over time, something subtle began to change. Where once there had been only one or two figures walking alone, now there were more. Not many, never crowded, but enough to be noticed. And so, the idea of traveling together began to take shape. At first, it was simple. A few merchants, each with their own goods, would meet along the same road. One carried spices wrapped carefully in cloth. Another brought woven fabrics, another perhaps led a donkey or two, loaded with small bundles. They would walk side by side, not as strangers for long, but as companions of the same slow journey. There was comfort in numbers. The roads could be long and uncertain, and though danger was rare, the unknown always lingered quietly in the distance. Traveling together made the journey feel softer, safer, more certain. And so, without any grand plan, caravans were born. They were not organized in the beginning. No leader, no strict rules, just a shared understanding. Move together. Rest together. Watch the road ahead, and behind. It was a gentle rhythm, like a quiet agreement carried in the air between them. As time passed, these small groups began to grow. A few travelers became many. Donkeys became camels in the drier lands, carts creaked slowly under the weight of goods, and the sound of the road changed. No longer just footsteps, but the soft shuffle of animals, the faint clink of supplies, the whisper of fabric moving in the wind. Still, it was never loud. Even in their growth, caravans carried a kind of calm. They moved slowly, always slowly. The pace was set by the animals, by the heat of the sun, by the need to conserve strength. There was no rushing across these lands, only steady progress, one quiet step at a time. The journeys became longer now. Caravans could travel far beyond what a single person might attempt alone. Across dry plains, through wide valleys, into lands that once felt distant and unreachable. With each journey, the routes became clearer, more familiar, more trusted. And along these routes, small resting places began to appear. Not cities, not even villages, just simple stops. A shaded area. A well with water, a place where travelers could sit, share food, and rest their tired feet. Over time, these resting places would become something more, but for now, they remained quiet pauses along the road. There was a rhythm to caravan life. Wake with the soft light of dawn, pack slowly, begin walking as the world stirred awake. By midday, the sun would grow stronger, and the caravan would pause, finding whatever shade it could. Then, as the light softened again, the journey would continue. Until evening wrapped everything in calm darkness. And at night, there was stillness. Small fires, gentle conversations, the low sounds of animals settling down. Above them, the sky stretched endlessly, filled with quiet stars. In those moments, far from any kingdom or city, the world felt vast, and yet strangely peaceful. In these caravans, people did not just share the road. They shared stories. Tales of distant lands, of markets filled with colors and scents, of rivers that flowed endlessly, and mountains that touched the sky. Each story traveled with them, carried from one place to another, just like the goods they protected so carefully. And so, the caravans grew, not in haste, but in harmony. They became the gentle threads that tied distant lands together, moving slowly across the world, weaving connections that would last for centuries. Imagine now. A long line of travelers stretching across the horizon. Camels moving steadily, their soft against the sand, merchants walking beside them, wrapped in quiet thought. The air is warm, the sky endless, and everything moves with a calm, steady rhythm. No noise, no rush, just the quiet rise of something important. Something lasting. And as you rest a little deeper, let your mind follow that caravan, step by step, into the distance, where the journey continues. Now, let your thoughts drift even further, beyond the familiar roads, into lands where the earth turns to sand, and the horizon feels endless. Far away from the villages and green fields, there stretched a network of routes so long and quiet, that no single traveler could ever see it all. This was the Silk Road, though in truth, it was not one road at all, but many, winding gently across deserts, mountains, and distant kingdoms. Here, the world felt different. The air was drier. The light softer but endless, and the ground beneath every step was no longer firm soil, but shifting sand. The wind moved slowly across the land, brushing the surface into ripples that changed shape with time. Caravans entered these lands carefully. This was not a place for rushing, not a place for wandering without thought. Every journey across the desert required patience, preparation, and trust in those who knew the way. Camels became the heart of the journey. Tall, steady, and calm, they moved across the sand with a quiet strength. Where other animals would tire, camels continued, their slow and even, carrying goods across distances that felt almost endless. The caravan stretched out in long lines, sometimes disappearing into the soft haze of heat and distance. From afar, they looked like moving shadows, gently crossing a golden sea. Days passed quietly here. The sun would rise, casting pale light across the dunes. And the caravan would begin its slow movement forward. There were no landmarks, no clear paths, only the knowledge carried by experienced guides, who read the land as if it were a story written just for them. At times, the wind would pick up. Soft at first, then stronger, lifting grains of sand into the air. It would not roar, but whisper, wrapping around the travelers, brushing against their faces and clothes. In these moments, the caravan would pause, waiting. Letting the desert settle once more. And then, they would continue. Water was precious. Every drop carried carefully, every sip measured. Travelers moved with quiet awareness, knowing that survival depended not on speed, but on patience and care. Yet even in this vast, empty space, there was connection. From distant lands came silk, smooth and light, folded gently and protected with great care. Spices too, their scents faint but present, carried across miles of sand. And along with these goods came something less visible, ideas, languages, and stories. The desert did not stop them. It simply slowed them, softened them, and made every journey more thoughtful. At night, everything changed. The heat faded, the air cooled, and the sky opened into something vast and breathtaking. Stars filled the darkness, brighter than anywhere else, stretching endlessly above the quiet caravan. Fires would glow softly. Travelers would sit close, speaking in low voices, or sometimes not speaking at all. The silence here was deep, but not empty. It carried a calm that settled into the heart, a stillness that asked for nothing. Imagine now, walking beside that caravan. The sand cool beneath your feet, the air gentle and still. Ahead, the line of camels moves slowly, their shapes outlined by soft moonlight. Behind you, only footprints, already fading into the endless desert. There is no rush. Only the quiet understanding that this journey will take time. And that time is part of the beauty. So let your mind wander across those endless sands, where the world feels wide, calm, and unhurried, and the Silk Road stretches softly into the distance, carrying its stories forward, step by gentle step. Crescent Moon. Now, stay in that calm, quiet place, and listen closely, not to voices, but to footsteps. Because across these long roads and endless sands, it was not kings or armies who shaped the rhythm of trade, but ordinary merchants. Quiet travelers, moving gently from one place to another, carrying their small worlds with them. Their footsteps were never loud. They did not rush, did not march, did not demand attention. Instead, they walked with a steady, patient rhythm, step after step after step, as if the road itself guided them forward. Each merchant carried something different. Some had bundles of cloth, folded neatly and tied with care. Others carried spices, sealed in small pouches, their faint aroma drifting softly through the air. Some brought simple tools, or pottery, or small items that might seem ordinary, but held great value to someone far away. But beyond these goods, they carried something else. Routine. Their days began quietly, often before the sun had fully risen. The world would still be wrapped in soft shadows, the air cool and calm. Slowly, without hurry, they would gather their things, secure their packs, and prepare for another day of walking. There was no rush to begin. The journey would unfold as it always did, slowly, gently, one step at a time. As they walked, their minds often wandered. Not in worry, not in urgency, but in a calm, drifting way. The sound of their own footsteps, the soft movement of animals, the distant call of birds, all blended into a quiet rhythm that made thinking feel effortless. Sometimes, they spoke. But conversations were never loud or hurried. Just a few words exchanged between travelers, simple thoughts. Shared observations, then silence again. And in that silence, there was comfort, not emptiness. The road became familiar to them. Even when the land changed, even when they crossed into new regions, there was something constant about the act of walking itself. The feeling of the ground beneath their feet, the steady movement forward, the quiet passage of time. And so, the merchants became part of the road, just as the road became part of them. Their footsteps marked the passage of trade. Not with noise, but with presence. Each step carried goods a little further, each journey connecting places that might otherwise remain distant and unknown. At times, they would pass through small settlements. Villages where life moved slowly, where people would pause to watch the travelers arrive. There was no grand welcome, no excitement, just a quiet exchange of goods and greetings. A merchant might lay out their items, carefully, patiently, allowing others to look, to consider, to trade. No rush. No pressure. Just the simple act of exchange, unfolding at its own pace. And when it was done, they would gather their things once more, and continue on. Always forward. Always calm. Imagine now, walking beside one of these merchants. You hear the soft crunch of earth beneath your feet, feel the gentle weight of the journey, see the road stretching endlessly ahead. There is no destination that demands speed, no clock to follow, only the quiet understanding that you will arrive, in time. The world moves slowly here. And in that slowness, there is peace. So let your thoughts follow those soft footsteps, steady and unbroken, as they carry the story forward, along roads that never hurry, and never truly end. Crescent Moon. Now. Let your mind stay soft and unhurried, and listen not just to footsteps, but to the gentle movement of the journey itself. Because along these long, quiet routes, trade was not carried by people alone. It moved with camels, with carts, with animals that walked patiently beside their human companions, each one adding to the slow, steady rhythm of the road. Camels, with their tall, calm presence, became the silent guardians of desert travel. They moved without haste. Their soft against the sand, their pace steady and unchanging. They did not tire easily, and they did not rush. In many ways, they seemed to understand the journey better than anyone. A caravan with camels felt balanced. Each animal carried carefully packed bundles, cloth, spices, grains, sometimes even fragile items wrapped in layers of protection. The loads were arranged with care, so nothing shifted too much as they walked. Because even the smallest imbalance could disturb the calm rhythm of the journey. In other lands, where the ground was firmer, carts became more common. Wooden wheels turned slowly over dirt paths, creaking gently with each movement. The sound was never harsh, just a soft, repeating note, like a quiet reminder that the journey was continuing, always continuing. Oxen or horses would pull these carts, they're slow and strong. They did not rush forward, they leaned into the effort. Moving with patience, guided by the hands of the traveler beside them. And so, a different kind of rhythm emerged. Not just footsteps now, but the soft padding of animals, the rolling of wheels, the faint clinking of goods shifting gently with motion. Together, these sounds blended into something almost soothing, like a quiet song carried across the land. There was a pattern to everything. Walk, pause, adjust, continue. At times, a strap might loosen, a bundle might tilt, and the caravan would stop. Not in frustration, but in calm acceptance. Someone would step forward, fix what needed fixing, and then, without hurry, the journey would begin again. Nothing was rushed. Because rushing would only bring trouble. The road demanded patience, and those who traveled it understood this deeply. Even the animals seemed to follow this quiet understanding. Camels resting when it was time to rest, carts standing still under the shade of a tree, oxen lowering their heads as the day grew warm. These moments of stillness were not delays. They were part of the rhythm, as natural as movement itself. And as the days passed, this rhythm settled into everyone. The travelers, the animals, even the road itself. Everything moved together, in harmony, without urgency, without noise. Imagine now, a long caravan stretching gently across the land. Camels stepping softly in a line, carts rolling slowly behind, wheels turning with a quiet, steady creak. The air is warm, the sky wide and pale. And the entire scene moves like a slow, peaceful current. No sudden movements. No sharp sounds. Just the steady flow, of trade, of travel, of time itself. And as you rest a little deeper, let that rhythm carry you, slow and even, like footsteps fading into the distance, like wheels turning without end. Calm, steady, and endlessly peaceful. Now, let the journey slow even further, until movement becomes stillness, and the road gently fades into rest. After many long days across dry lands and endless sand, caravans would finally reach places of quiet shelter. These were known as caravanserais, simple resting places, built along the trade routes, where travelers could pause, recover, and wait. From a distance, a caravanserai appeared slowly, like a calm shape rising from the horizon. Walls of stone or mud, strong and steady, offering protection from wind and drifting sand. A single entrance, wide enough for animals and carts, welcoming the tired travelers inside. And once inside, everything changed. The movement of the road softened into stillness. Camels were gently unloaded, their carefully lifted and placed on the ground. Carts stood silent, wheels no longer turning. Travelers stretched their tired limbs, and for a moment, simply stood in the quiet, letting the journey settle within them. There was no rush here. Caravanserais were not places of quick stops, but of long, patient waiting. Some travelers would stay for a single night, others for many days. It all depended on the road ahead, the condition of their animals, or the need to join another caravan for safety. Time moved differently inside these walls. The outside world, hot, vast, and endless, felt distant. Inside, there was shade, cool air, and a sense of calm that wrapped gently around everyone who entered. In the center, there was often an open courtyard. Here, animals rested quietly, sitting or standing in soft stillness. Around the edges, simple rooms or sheltered spaces allowed travelers to sleep, eat, or sit in quiet thought. Water, precious and carefully stored, was shared with care. Travelers would drink slowly, feeling the coolness bring them back from the dryness of the road. Food, too, was simple: bread, grains, dried fruits, nothing elaborate, but enough. And then, there was waiting. Not restless waiting, but a calm, accepting kind. Merchants would sit beside their goods, checking, adjusting, sometimes just watching. Others would lie down and rest, their eyes closing as sleep came easily after long days of walking. Conversations happened, but softly. Stories exchanged between strangers, tales of distant lands, or simple observations about the journey. Different languages blended together, not always understood, but still shared. And often, silence returned. A deep, peaceful silence, broken only by the soft sounds of animals, or the gentle movement of wind brushing against the walls. Outside, the desert continued endlessly. But inside, there was pause. Imagine now, sitting in the shade of a caravanserai. The air is cool, the ground beneath you steady and calm. Around you, travelers rest, some awake, some asleep, all wrapped in the quiet comfort of stillness. Your journey is not over. But for now, there is nowhere to go. No need to move. Only to sit, to breathe, and to wait. And in this waiting, something gentle happens. The body recovers, the mind softens, and the road, for a little while, lets you rest. So stay here, just a little longer, in this quiet place between journeys. Where time slows down, and the world feels still, and peaceful. Crescent Moon. Now, remain in that quiet stillness, and let something subtle drift into the air, something soft, something almost invisible. A scent. Because along these slow and endless trade routes, there were things that traveled far beyond what anyone could see. Not armies, not rulers, but spices, small, delicate, and quietly powerful. They began their journey in warm, distant lands. In places where the air was rich with fragrance. Where plants grew slowly under gentle sun, and where hands carefully gathered each spice with patience and care. These were not large or heavy goods, but small treasures, dried, preserved, and wrapped in cloth. At first glance, they seemed simple. Tiny seeds, curled bark, fine powders, nothing that would draw great attention. And yet, these small things would travel further than kings ever could. Carried in pouches, tucked safely among other goods, spices moved silently across deserts, mountains, and oceans. They passed from one merchant to another, from one caravan to the next, always continuing forward. Their journey was never rushed. Because like everything else on these roads, they followed the rhythm of patience. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still they traveled. Through heat, through wind, through long nights beneath quiet skies. The caravans protected them carefully, knowing their value, not just in trade, but in the way they transformed simple life. When they finally reached distant lands, their presence was gentle, yet deeply felt. A pinch of spice could change a meal, turning something plain into something warm and comforting. A faint scent could fill a room, bringing with it a feeling of somewhere far away, somewhere unknown. People who had never left their villages, who had never seen deserts or oceans, could still experience something of those distant places, through these tiny, fragrant gifts. And so, spices carried more than flavor. They carried memory. They carried distance. They carried quiet connections between lands that might never meet in any other way. No king could travel so far, so quietly, and be welcomed so easily. Because spices did not demand attention. They arrived softly, blending into daily life, becoming part of homes, meals, and quiet moments. Their journey ended not with noise or celebration, but with use, with warmth, with comfort. And still, more continued to come. The road never truly stopped. Caravans moved again, carrying fresh supplies, repeating the slow and endless cycle. And with each journey, the world became just a little smaller, a little closer, a little more connected. Imagine now, holding something small in your hand. Something light, almost weightless, yet full of a soft, distant scent. As you breathe it in, your mind drifts, far beyond where you are, into lands you have never seen, carried there without effort. That is the quiet power of these traveling spices. Not loud, not forceful, but gentle and endless. So let that soft fragrance linger, as your thoughts drift with it, across deserts and roads, through time and distance, carried slowly forward, just like the story itself. Now, let everything soften again, and imagine not a single road, but many, stretching quietly across a vast land. Because by now, the slow journeys of merchants, the steady rhythm of caravans, and the patient movement of goods had begun to form something larger. Not loud, not sudden, but wide and continuous. A gentle flow. Across Asia, goods began to move like a calm river. There was no single beginning, and no clear end. Instead, there were many starting points, many destinations. All connected by these quiet, winding routes. From east to west, from north to south, everything moved slowly, but steadily. Silk from distant lands, smooth and carefully folded, passed through many hands before reaching its final place. Spices continued their long, fragrant journeys, drifting across deserts and mountains. Metals, grains, fabrics, all moving together, each finding its way through the patient network of trade. No one hurried this process. Because it could not be hurried. Each exchange took time, each journey required care, and each step depended on the one before it. The flow of goods was not like a rushing river, but like a slow stream, steady, quiet, and continuous. One merchant would carry goods part of the way. Then another would take them further. And another, and another. In this way, a single item could travel across vast distances, without any one person completing the full journey. It was a shared movement, a chain of calm exchanges, linking people who would never meet, yet still depended on one another. Markets began to reflect this gentle flow. In small towns and growing cities, goods from faraway lands would appear quietly, laid out beside local items. A piece of cloth from one region, next to spices from another, next to tools made nearby. There was no announcement. No grand arrival. Just the quiet presence of something new. And people would notice, slowly, with curiosity rather than excitement. They would touch the fabric, smell the spices, examine the craftsmanship, and consider what they might offer in return. Trade remained calm. Even as it grew, even as it connected more and more of the world, it never lost its slow, thoughtful nature. Across plains, through valleys, along rivers and mountain paths, the flow continued. Always moving. Always steady. Always quiet. Imagine now, looking down from above, seeing these routes stretch across the land like soft lines drawn over the earth. Along them, tiny figures move, caravans drifting forward, goods passing gently from one place to another. Nothing rushes. Nothing stops. Everything flows, in its own time. And as you rest a little deeper, let your thoughts follow that flow, like a leaf carried on calm water, drifting slowly across a vast and peaceful world. Where trade is not a force, but a quiet connection, moving endlessly forward. Crescent moon. Now, let the long roads fade gently behind you, and imagine arriving somewhere a little more alive, yet still calm, still unhurried. A market town. After days, or even weeks, of slow travel, merchants would finally step into these small centers of life. At first, it might seem busy, more voices, more movement, more people than the quiet roads offered. But even here, everything remained soft. The markets did not roar with noise. They hummed. A low, steady rhythm of voices, footsteps, and quiet exchanges. Nothing rushed, nothing overwhelming, just a gentle gathering of people, each moving at their own pace. Stalls were simple. Wooden tables, cloths spread across the ground, small displays of goods arranged with care. A merchant would lay out their items slowly, smoothing fabric, placing jars, arranging bundles so they could be seen clearly. There was no urgency to sell. Only the quiet hope that someone might stop, look, and consider. People moved through the market like a slow stream. They paused when something caught their attention, leaned in slightly, examined the goods with calm curiosity. Hands would gently touch the fabric, lift a small item, or bring spices closer for a faint scent. Conversations were soft. A question asked quietly. A price suggested calmly. A moment of thought, before an answer. There was no pressure, no loud bargaining. Just a patient back and forth, like a slow conversation that unfolded in its own time. Sometimes, no trade happened at all. A person might look, think, and then move on. And that was perfectly fine. The merchant would simply sit back, adjust their goods, and wait again. Because waiting was part of the rhythm. Coins were used in some places, small pieces of metal exchanged with care. In others, barter still continued, one item offered for another, each side considering the balance quietly. A piece of cloth, for a measure of grain. A small pouch of spice, for a handmade tool. No rush. Just understanding. Around the market, life continued gently. Children walked beside their families, watching with quiet curiosity. Nearby, someone might prepare simple food, the faint scent drifting through the air. Animals rested in the shade, unmoving, as if even they were part of the stillness. Time passed without notice. The sun moved slowly across the sky, shadows shifting, light softening. Some merchants would pack up early, others would stay until the last bit of daylight faded. And when it was time, everything was gathered again. Cloths folded, goods wrapped, carts prepared, animals gently led away. The market would slowly empty, returning to quiet, as if nothing had happened at all. But something had. Goods had changed hands. Stories had been shared. Connections had deepened, quietly. Without noise or attention. Imagine now, walking through that market. The ground firm beneath your feet, the air warm and calm. Around you, people move gently, voices soft, movements unhurried. You pause at a stall, look at something simple, hold it for a moment, then place it back. There is no rush to decide. No need to hurry forward. Only the calm presence of the moment. And as the light begins to fade, the market slowly drifts into stillness once more, leaving behind only quiet memories. And the soft continuation of the journey ahead. Crescent moon. Now, let the soft markets fade behind you, and feel the air grow cooler, thinner, as the land begins to rise. The roads you've been following, those gentle, dusty paths, do not always stay wide and open. Sometimes, they lead into places more quiet, more hidden, where the earth lifts itself into great mountains, and the journey becomes slower still. Here, the paths are not easy to see. They wind carefully along narrow edges, climbing slowly upward, then dipping again between steep slopes. From a distance, they almost disappear, blending into rock and shadow, known only to those who have walked them before. These are the mountain passes. Not many travelers choose them lightly. The air is cooler here, the wind softer, yet sharper, brushing gently against the face. Each step must be placed with care, not rushed, not careless, because the path allows no hurry. Caravans grow quieter in these places. The steady rhythm of the journey changes, becoming slower, more thoughtful. Animals move carefully, they're deliberate, their balance sure. Carts are often left behind in lower lands, replaced by smaller loads carried by animals or by the travelers themselves. Everything becomes simpler. Only what is needed, only what can be carried. And so, the journey continues, lighter, quieter, deeper into the mountains. Sometimes, the path narrows so much, that only one traveler can pass at a time. Others wait patiently behind, no frustration, no urgency, just the quiet understanding that this is how the road must be. Far below, valleys stretch out in silence. From above, they look distant, almost dreamlike, as if part of another world. The sounds of markets, of roads, of daily life, fade away completely, leaving only the soft whisper of wind, and the gentle echo of footsteps against stone. There are moments of stillness here, unlike anywhere else. A traveler might pause. Not out of tiredness, but simply to look. To take in the vastness, the calm, the feeling of being surrounded by something ancient and unmoving. Time feels different in the mountains. Slower, deeper, as if each moment lingers just a little longer. And yet, even in these quiet, hidden paths, trade continues. Goods are carried carefully, protected from cold and movement. Silk wrapped tightly, spices sealed, small items tucked safely away. Each one still part of the same slow journey. Still moving forward, even here. Because the mountains do not stop the flow. They simply guide it, shaping the path into something more quiet, more focused. Travelers who cross these passes often share a silent bond. They understand the effort, the patience, the calm strength it takes to move through such places. Words are few, but the connection is there, carried in shared, and steady breath. Imagine now, walking along one of these narrow paths. The ground firm beneath your feet, the air cool and still. To one side, the mountain rises, strong and silent. To the other, the land falls away into quiet distance. You move slowly, carefully, with each step placed just right. There is no rush here. Only presence. Only awareness. And as you continue along this hidden path, the world feels both vast and peaceful, as if you are walking not just through mountains, but through a quiet moment in time itself. So let your thoughts follow that path. Winding gently through the high places, where the air is calm, the road is narrow, and the journey continues, soft and steady. Crescent moon. Now, come a little closer to the journey, not just the road beneath your feet, but the quiet life moving along it. Because a caravan is not only a line of travelers. It is a small, moving world. Within it, life unfolds slowly, gently, carried forward step by step across the land. At the start of each day, there is a soft awakening. The sky is still pale. The air cool, and the world feels calm and untouched. One by one, travelers rise, stretching quietly, gathering their belongings with practiced care. There is no rush to begin, only a shared understanding that the journey will continue. Animals are prepared with patience. Bundles are checked, ropes tightened, loads adjusted so everything sits just right. Camels stand calmly, carts wait silently, and the caravan slowly comes to life, not with noise, but with quiet movement. And then, without announcement, they begin. Walking together, in a loose, steady line. Inside the caravan, each person has their place. Some walk beside the animals, guiding them gently. Others keep watch, looking ahead, or behind, not with worry, but with quiet awareness. Some simply walk, their thoughts drifting with the rhythm of the road. There is no strict order, yet everything feels balanced. As the hours pass, a quiet routine settles in. The sound of footsteps, the soft shifting of goods, the gentle sway of movement. It becomes something familiar, almost comforting, like a slow, repeating pattern that carries everyone forward. Conversations come and go. A few words shared between travelers, a quiet question, a soft reply, then silence again. No one feels the need to fill the space with constant talk. The silence itself becomes part of the companionship. There are moments of pause. When the sun rises higher, and the air grows warm, the caravan stops. Not suddenly, not sharply, but gradually. Travelers find small patches of shade, animals rest, and everything slows to stillness once more. Food is simple. Bread, dried fruits, perhaps something warm if time allows. It is eaten slowly, without hurry, as if the act of eating is just another part of the calm rhythm. Then, when the time feels right, the journey begins again. Always forward. Always steady. At night, the caravan becomes something else entirely. Fires glow softly in the darkness, small circles of light in a vast, quiet world. Travelers sit together, some speaking in low voices, others simply watching the flames, or the endless sky above. Stars fill the night. Clear, bright, unmoving. And beneath them, the caravan rests. Some sleep quickly, their bodies tired from the day. Others stay awake a little longer, wrapped in thought. Or simply enjoying the stillness that only the open road can bring. There is a sense of belonging here. Not loud, not spoken, but felt. Each person part of the same slow journey, each step shared, each moment connected. Imagine now, walking within that caravan. You are not alone, yet there is quiet all around you. The rhythm of movement surrounds you, soft and steady. You feel the gentle presence of others, the calm of shared travel, the peace of knowing the road continues. There is no need to rush ahead. No need to fall behind. Only to walk, with the others, in this small, moving world. And as you settle deeper into that feeling, let the rhythm of the caravan carry you, slow and even, through the night, through the journey, through the quiet story that never hurries. Now, let the land slowly fade away, and feel the air grow softer, cooler, touched by something new. The sea. After long journeys across dust and stone, the trade routes did not end. They simply changed, becoming something wider, something deeper, something that moved with the breath of the world itself. The ocean routes. Here, there were no roads to follow, no footprints to guide the way. Only water, stretching endlessly in every direction, calm one moment, gently shifting the next. And yet, even here, trade continued. Ships replaced caravans. Wooden vessels, simple but strong, floating quietly upon the surface. Their sails lifted gently into the wind, catching its invisible movement, allowing the ship to drift forward, slow and steady. There was no rushing across the sea. Just like the land. The ocean had its own rhythm. A softer one. The wind decided the pace. Sometimes it moved steadily, carrying the ships forward without effort. Other times, it slowed, almost fading, leaving the vessel to drift quietly, waiting, until the journey could continue again. The sailors understood this. They did not fight the wind. They listened to it. They watched the sky, felt the air, and allowed the journey to unfold as it wished. On the deck of a ship, life was calm, but different. The ground beneath was never still. It moved gently, rising and falling with the waves. At first, it might feel unfamiliar, but over time, it became part of the rhythm, like the slow breathing of the ocean itself. Goods were stored carefully below. Silk, spices, grains, all protected from moisture and movement. Each item carried across water instead of land, continuing the same quiet journey, just on a different path. Days passed slowly at sea. The horizon remained the same, a soft line where sky met water. There were no landmarks, no villages, no mountains, only the endless openness, and the quiet sound of water brushing against the ship. At times, there was complete stillness. The wind would fade, the sails would rest, and the ship would drift, gently, without direction. In these moments, everything felt paused, as if time itself had slowed to a whisper. And then, the wind would return. Soft at first, then steady. Filling the sails once more, guiding the ship forward. At night, the ocean became something magical. The sky stretched endlessly above, filled with stars, reflected faintly in the dark water below. The ship moved quietly through this vast space, as if floating between two skies. The sounds were soft. Water, wind, wood gently creaking. Nothing more. Imagine now, standing on that quiet deck. The air cool against your skin, the wind brushing gently past you. The ship moves slowly beneath your feet, not with force, but with grace, carried by something you cannot see. There is no road here. And yet, you are still traveling. Still moving forward, guided only by the wind, and the calm understanding of those who know the sea. So let your thoughts drift with that ship, across the endless water, where the routes are invisible, the journey is gentle, and the wind whispers softly, carrying everything onward. Now, remain upon the quiet sea. And let the journey carry you a little further, into warmer waters, where the air feels softer, and the winds move with a gentle, familiar rhythm. Here lies the Indian Ocean, vast and calm, stretching between distant lands, quietly connecting shores that may never see one another. Upon these waters, ships drifted. Not rushed, not driven, but guided. The sailors who traveled here understood something important, something patient. The ocean did not need to be conquered. It only needed to be followed, listened to, trusted. And so, their ships moved with the wind, not against it. The sails would lift slowly, catching the breeze that passed across the water. There was no sudden motion, only a steady pull, a soft guiding force that carried the ship forward across the wide, open sea. These journeys were long. Longer than any road, longer than any caravan crossing. Days blended into nights, and nights into days, until time itself felt like a slow, endless wave. But there was no urgency. Because here, everything depended on the wind. Sometimes, the air would move steadily, and the ships would glide forward with ease. Other times, the wind would fade, leaving the vessel to drift quietly, rocking gently on the water, waiting for the journey to begin again. This waiting was not a problem. It was simply part of life at sea. The sailors would sit, watch the horizon, adjust ropes, check the sails, all in calm, practiced movements. There was no rush to arrive, only the quiet trust that they would. In time. Below the deck, goods rested carefully. Spices from warm lands, fabrics folded with care, small treasures wrapped and protected from the sea air. Each item part of the same slow flow of trade, now carried across water instead of land. Above, the sky stretched endlessly. Soft blues during the day, deep and endless at night. The sun rose gently, and set without hurry, marking time in a way that felt natural, unforced. And at night, the ocean became even quieter. The ship moved softly through dark water, guided by stars above. The wind whispered through the sails, and the waves touched the sides of the vessel with a gentle, repeating sound. It was a different kind of silence. Not empty, but full. Full of movement, full of calm, full of the quiet understanding that the journey was always continuing, even when it seemed still. Imagine now, lying on the deck of that ship. The wood beneath you warm from the day, the air cool as night begins to settle. You look up, and see only stars, endless and steady. Around you, nothing but ocean, stretching in every direction. The ship moves gently, almost like a lullaby. Back and forth, slow and steady. And in that motion, there is peace. No roads to follow. No steps to take. Only the quiet drift, across the Indian Ocean, where ships moved not with force, but with patience, carried softly by wind and time. Toward distant shores that waited in calm silence. Now, stay upon the quiet ocean, and feel the air around you begin to change, ever so gently. Because in these waters, the wind was not random. It followed a pattern. A slow, patient rhythm, known to those who listened carefully. These were the monsoon winds, steady and predictable, arriving not in haste, but in their own perfect time. The sailors understood this deeply. They did not simply set sail whenever they wished. Instead, they waited. Days, sometimes weeks, watching the sky, feeling the air, sensing the subtle shift that would tell them the winds were about to change. There was no impatience in this waiting. Because they knew, the journey depended on it. When the monsoon winds arrived, they did so gently at first. A soft breeze, brushing across the water, almost unnoticed. Then, slowly, steadily, it would grow stronger, filling the sails, guiding the ships forward with quiet certainty. In one season, the winds would carry ships in one direction. Months later, they would return, flowing the other way, allowing travelers to make their journey back. It was like a breath. In and out. Forward and home again. This rhythm shaped everything. Merchants planned their journeys around it. Goods were gathered, ships prepared, and then, they waited. Not with frustration, but with calm acceptance, knowing that nothing could move until the wind was ready. Ports became places of stillness during these times. Ships rested quietly along the shore, their sails lowered, their paused. Sailors spent their days repairing, resting, or simply watching the horizon, where the wind would one day return. And when it did, everything began again. Not suddenly, not chaotically, but smoothly. Sails lifted, ropes tightened, and one by one, ships drifted back onto the open water, carried by the same gentle force that had guided so many before them. The monsoon winds were not loud. They did not roar or rush. They moved with calm purpose, steady and reliable, like a quiet promise that the journey would continue, when the time was right. Imagine now, standing at the edge of the sea. The air is still, the water calm, ships resting in silence. You wait, not knowing exactly when, but trusting that something will change. And then, you feel it. A soft breeze, brushing against your face. Light, gentle, but certain. The beginning of movement. The beginning of the journey once more. So let your thoughts drift with that wind, slow and steady, carrying ships across the ocean, guided not by urgency, but by patience, by timing, by the quiet rhythm of the world itself. Now, remain by the edge of the sea, where land and water meet, and everything seems to pause, just for a moment. Along these quiet shores, there were places where journeys would begin, and end. Ports. Not always busy, not always alive with movement, but places that followed their own gentle rhythm. Rising and resting with the flow of trade. At certain times, they felt almost asleep. Ships rested along the water, their sails lowered, gently swaying with the tide. The docks were calm, footsteps few, voices soft and distant. Warehouses stood still, holding goods that waited patiently for their next journey. Nothing hurried. Nothing pushed forward. It was a time of waiting. Merchants sat quietly, watching the sea, knowing that without the right winds, nothing would move. Sailors repaired ropes, checked wooden boards, or simply rested, letting the days pass slowly. Even the air felt still. Warm, soft, unmoving. As if the entire port was breathing slowly, in a deep and peaceful sleep. But then, gradually, something would change. The wind would return. Ships would appear on the horizon, small at first, then growing larger as they drifted closer. One ship. Then another, and soon, the quiet port would begin to awaken. Not suddenly, not loudly, but gently. Sails would rise again, ropes pulled into place, footsteps becoming more frequent. Merchants would stand, preparing their goods, opening crates, laying things out with care. The docks would fill, slowly, with movement. Goods were carried from ships to land, and from land to ships. Spices, fabrics, grains, all moving carefully, each item continuing its long and patient journey. Voices returned. But still soft. Instructions given calmly, greetings exchanged quietly, as if even in its busiest moments, the port remembered its stillness. There was no chaos. Only flow. A calm, steady exchange, like the tide itself, coming in, then going out. Days like this would pass, filled with gentle activity, until once again, the rhythm slowed. Ships would leave, one by one, carried away by the wind. The docks would empty, footsteps fading, voices quieting. And slowly, the port would return to rest. Back to stillness. Back to waiting. Imagine now, standing on that quiet shore. The water moves softly before you, ships resting nearby, the air calm and warm. You can feel the rhythm of the place, not in noise, but in its gentle rise and fall. Awake and asleep. Moving and still. Always changing, yet always calm. And as you stand there, watching the slow dance of ships and sea, let your thoughts drift with that rhythm, soft and steady, like the tide itself, carrying the story forward. Now, let the busy ports fade gently behind you, and return once more to the quiet movement of the journey. Because along these long and patient trade routes, not everything that traveled could be seen or touched. Some things were lighter. Softer. Carried not in bags or carts, but in words, in thoughts, in quiet conversations shared along the way. Ideas. Stories. They moved just as slowly as goods, sometimes even slower, passing from one person to another, across many days, many places. Many voices. A merchant might leave one town with a simple tale. A story heard beside a fire, a small idea shared in a quiet moment. It would stay with them, gently, as they walked, carried not with effort, but with memory. Then, somewhere far away, they would share it again. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but softly, during rest, or while walking beside another traveler. A few words, a simple telling, and the story would continue its journey. It would change, just a little. Not on purpose. Not quickly, but naturally. A detail added, a feeling softened, a moment remembered differently. And then, it would be passed on again, moving further, carried by someone new. In this way, stories traveled across lands. They crossed deserts, climbed mountains, drifted over oceans, all without a single map or plan. No one controlled them, no one owned them, and yet, they continued, quietly, endlessly. Ideas moved in the same way. A new way of doing something, a different belief. A simple thought about the world. Shared once, then again, and again, until it reached places far beyond where it began. No rush. No force. Just a slow and gentle spreading, like ripples across still water. People who had never met, who spoke different languages, who lived in distant lands, could still be connected through these quiet exchanges. A thought carried from one place, softly arriving in another, becoming part of something new. Even silence played a role. Sometimes, a traveler would not fully understand what they heard, but they would remember a piece of it, a feeling, a tone, and carry that forward. And even that small part, would continue the journey. Nothing was lost. Only changed, softened, reshaped by time and distance. Imagine now, sitting beside a quiet fire. The night is calm, the air still. Someone nearby begins to speak, telling a simple story. You listen, not trying to hold on to every word, but feeling the rhythm. The meaning behind it. And later, Much later, you find yourself sharing that same story, in your own way, with someone else. And so, it continues. From one voice, to another. From one place, to the next. Never rushing. Always moving. So let your thoughts drift with these quiet stories, carried gently across the world, changing slowly, connecting people in ways that cannot be seen, only felt, as the journey continues. Now, let the quiet stories settle. And bring your focus gently back to something simple, something steady. Exchange. Along these slow and patient trade routes, not everything was complicated. In fact, most things were very simple, guided not by systems or rules, but by understanding, by balance, by trust. In many places, trade began without coins at all. Barter. One item, for another. A piece of cloth, for a measure of grain. A small pouch of spice, for a handmade tool. Each exchange was quiet, thoughtful, and unhurried. Both sides would look, consider, and come to a calm agreement. There was no rush to decide. Only the feeling, that something was fair. Sometimes, a trade would take time. A pause, a moment of silence, a slight adjustment. Perhaps a little more grain added, or a second item included, until both sides felt at ease. And when that moment arrived, the exchange would happen, gently, without noise. It was not about winning. It was about balance. Over time, coins began to appear. Small, simple pieces of metal, carried carefully in pouches. They did not replace barter completely, but they made certain exchanges easier, especially in places where people did not know each other well. A coin could speak quietly, where words might not. It carried a shared understanding, a value that many recognized, even across different lands. And so, a merchant could offer a coin, and receive something in return, without long discussion. But even with coins, the pace did not change. Trade remained slow. Careful. Calm. Coins were counted gently, passed from hand to hand, placed away with care. There was no clinking rush, no hurried exchange, just the same steady rhythm that guided everything else on these routes. In some places, barter and coins existed side by side. A traveler might trade goods in one village, then use coins in another, adjusting quietly to each place, each custom. There was no strict rule, only what felt right in that moment. And through it all, trust remained important. Not loud, not declared, but present. A shared understanding that both sides would act fairly, that the exchange would be honest, that the balance would be respected. Without this quiet trust, the roads would feel different, less certain, less calm. But here, it was enough. Imagine now, standing at a small market stall. Before you, simple goods are laid out, nothing extravagant, just items made with care. You hold something in your hand, considering it. Feeling its weight, its texture. The other person waits, patiently. No pressure. No hurry. You offer something in return, perhaps a coin, perhaps another item. There is a pause, a quiet moment of understanding, and then, a gentle nod. The exchange is complete. Simple. Calm. Balanced. And as you step away, the journey continues, just as it always has, carried not by complexity, but by these small, quiet moments of connection, repeated again and again, across the endless, peaceful roads of trade. Now, let the calm exchange fade softly, and imagine the road narrowing once more, leading toward a quiet edge between lands. A border. Not always marked with walls or lines, but felt, in small, subtle ways. A change in language, a shift in clothing, a different rhythm in the air. Travelers would sense it, even before they fully arrived. And here, there were watchers. Border guards. They were not loud, not harsh, but present. Standing quietly along the path, or near simple gates. Observing those who passed from one land into another. Their role was steady, patient, much like the roads themselves. Caravans would slow as they approached. Not out of fear, but out of respect for the moment. The steady rhythm of walking softened, footsteps becoming more careful, more aware. Animals paused, carts rested, and the journey took a brief, quiet breath. The guards would watch. Not with suspicion, but with attention. Their eyes moved gently across the travelers, the goods. The animals. They looked for understanding, for order, for the quiet assurance that everything was as it should be. Sometimes, there were simple questions. Where have you come from? What do you carry? Where are you going? The answers were given calmly. No rush. No tension. Just a soft exchange of words, enough to satisfy the moment. In some places, a small fee was offered. Coins passed quietly from hand to hand, not as a burden, but as part of the journey. A simple acknowledgement that the traveler was moving from one place into another. Then, a nod. A quiet signal. And the road would open once more. The caravan would begin again, crossing that invisible line, entering a new land, where things felt just a little different, yet still familiar. The guards remained behind. Still, watchful, steady. Their presence was not meant to stop the journey, but to guide it, to keep its flow gentle and ordered. They were part of the rhythm, just like the roads, the markets, the winds. Even here, nothing rushed. Even here, everything remained calm. Imagine now, standing at that quiet border. The air feels slightly different, the land ahead unfamiliar, yet welcoming. Behind you, the path you have traveled stretches into the distance. Before you, a new road begins. A guard stands nearby, silent. Observant. You pause for a moment, then step forward. And just like that, you cross. No noise. No sudden change. Only the quiet continuation of the same slow journey, now moving through another part of the world. So let your thoughts drift across that gentle boundary, where one land becomes another, and the road, soft and endless, carries you onward. Now, stay calm, stay relaxed, and let the road stretch out before you once more. Because even in this slow and peaceful world, not everything was completely safe. But the dangers here were not loud. They did not rush forward or shout for attention. They lingered, quietly, at the edges of the journey. Sometimes, it was the land itself. A path that became uneven, stones shifting beneath careful steps. A sudden change in weather, wind growing stronger, rain falling softly but steadily, turning the road into something slower, more uncertain. Travelers did not panic. They simply adjusted. Walking more carefully. Pausing when needed, waiting for the land to settle again. The journey continued, just a little slower, a little more aware. At other times, it was the distance. Long stretches of road with no villages, no water, no shelter. The quiet could feel deeper here, the silence stretching endlessly in every direction. A traveler might feel small, surrounded by space, with only the sound of their own movement to keep them company. But even this was not frightening. Just part of the road. Caravans helped soften these moments. Together, travelers shared the journey, watching over one another, not with worry, but with quiet care. A glance, a pause, a shared understanding that no one was truly alone. And then, there were those rare, uncertain encounters. Strangers on the road, not always familiar, not always predictable. They might pass by without a word, or stop briefly, their presence quiet but unknown. The caravan would remain calm. Moving together, staying close. Continuing forward without sudden change. Most encounters ended as softly as they began, fading back into the stillness of the road. Because even danger followed the same rhythm. Slow. Uncertain. But rarely loud. Night could bring its own kind of unease. The darkness stretching wide, the sounds of the land changing, small movements in the distance, the wind brushing against tents and. For a moment, the world might feel more mysterious, less clear. But then, the fire would glow. Soft light, steady warmth, bringing comfort back into the space. Travelers would rest, breathe, and allow the calm to return once more. Nothing stayed tense for long. Because the road did not hold on to fear. It simply moved forward. Imagine now, walking along that quiet path. The sky above soft and fading, the air still. Somewhere in the distance, something shifts, something unknown, but it does not come closer. It remains far away, part of the landscape, not part of your journey. You keep walking. Step by step. Calm. Steady. Unhurried. Because even with its quiet dangers, the road remains what it has always been. A path forward. And as you continue along it, let any worry drift away, like dust in the wind, leaving only the soft rhythm of your, carrying you gently onward. Crescent moon. Now, let the long road soften again, and feel the gentle pull toward places of rest. Because along these endless trade routes, travelers could not walk forever. They needed pause. They needed warmth. They needed quiet places where the journey could slow, and the body could recover. And so, along the roads, there were inns, taverns, and simple resting places. They were not grand. Not large or impressive. Just small shelters, built with care, offering a space to stop, to sit, to breathe. From a distance, an inn might appear slowly, a soft glow of light as evening settled in. A simple structure beside the road, smoke rising gently into the darkening sky. For a tired traveler, it felt like comfort. As they entered, the world outside faded. The wind, the dust, the long silence of the road, all left behind at the door. Inside, there was warmth, a quiet hum of life, and the soft presence of others who had also stopped for the night. There was no rush here. Travelers would find a place to sit, or lie down, setting aside there with care. The act of resting felt natural, as if the journey itself had guided them to this moment. Food was simple, but welcome. Warm bread, perhaps a small meal, shared slowly, without hurry. The warmth of it spread gently, easing the tiredness of the day. In taverns, there was a little more sound, but still soft. Low voices, quiet conversations, travelers sharing small pieces of their journey. Not loud stories, not grand tales, just simple words, exchanged in calm tones. Sometimes, someone would speak of the road ahead. A condition of a path, a place to be careful, a village worth visiting. These were not warnings. Not instructions, just gentle guidance, passed along from one traveler to another. And then, silence would return. Fires would glow softly, shadows moving gently along the walls. Outside, the night would deepen, wrapping the world in stillness. Sleep came easily in these places. Not heavy, not restless, but calm. The kind of sleep that follows a long, steady day, where the body relaxes, and the mind drifts without effort. By morning, the inn would begin to wake again. Slowly. Travelers rising, gathering their things, preparing quietly for another day. There were no sudden departures, no rush to leave. Each person moved at their own pace, stepping back onto the road when the moment felt right. And then, they were gone. The inn returned to quiet, waiting for the next traveler, the next gentle pause in the endless flow of the journey. Imagine now, sitting inside that warm space. A soft fire nearby, the air calm and still. Around you, others rest quietly. Each one part of their own journey, yet sharing this moment of stillness. There is nothing you need to do. Nowhere you need to go. Only to rest. And as you settle into that feeling, let the warmth of this place surround you, like a pause in time, before the road calls once more, softly, gently, onward. Now, rest a little deeper, and let all the roads, deserts, mountains, and oceans come together, slowly, softly, into one quiet thought. Connection. By now, the journeys you've followed, the caravans you've walked beside, the ships you've drifted upon, have all been part of something larger. Not loud, not sudden, but steady and continuous. Trade did not just move goods. It connected worlds. Places that once felt far apart, unknown, even unimaginable, began to feel a little closer. Not because they moved, but because something gentle passed between them, again and again. A piece of cloth made in one land, could be worn in another. A spice grown in a distant place could flavor a meal far away. A story told beside a fire, could be heard again, across mountains and seas. None of this happened quickly. There were no sudden changes. Only a slow weaving, like threads coming together, forming something quiet, something lasting. Each journey added a little more. Each exchange, each step, each passing moment, bringing distant places into soft connection. People who would never meet, still shared something. A good, an idea, a small part of their world. And yet, everything remained calm. There was no force, no demand, no rush to connect. It simply happened, naturally, as travelers continued their slow and steady movement across the land and sea. Even differences remained. Languages stayed unique, customs stayed gentle and distinct, ways of life continued in their own rhythm. But alongside these differences, there was now a quiet understanding. A sense that beyond the horizon, there were others. Living, working, trading, just the same. And this understanding spread, softly. Not in words, not in declarations, but in small, repeated moments of exchange. A shared object, a familiar scent, a pattern recognized, something that felt both new and strangely known. The world did not become smaller. It became closer. Not by distance, but by feeling. Imagine now, looking across a vast landscape. Mountains in the distance, rivers winding gently, roads stretching far beyond what you can see. Somewhere out there, countless travelers move. Slowly, quietly, each one part of the same gentle flow. You cannot see them all. But you know they are there. And through them, everything is connected. So let your thoughts rest in that feeling, soft and wide, like a calm understanding that stretches across the world, carried not by speed, but by patience, by time, by the quiet beauty of journeys that never hurry. Crescent Moon. Now, let your thoughts settle gently, and imagine the quiet places along these roads beginning to change, slowly. Almost without notice. Because where trade passed again and again, something began to grow. Not suddenly. Not loudly. But gradually, like a soft unfolding. Small stops along the road, simple resting places, and quiet market towns, began to feel a little fuller. A few more travelers staying a little longer, a few more goods arriving, a few more exchanges taking place. At first, it was hardly noticeable. One extra stall in the market. A new shelter built beside an old one. A place where travelers returned, again and again. And over time, these places began to grow. Houses gathered closer together, paths became more defined, and the gentle hum of life settled in. What was once just a stop along the journey, slowly became a destination of its own. These were the early trade cities. They did not rise quickly. There were no sudden walls, no grand buildings appearing overnight. Instead, they grew with patience, shaped by the steady rhythm of trade. By the footsteps of travelers who came and went. Each caravan brought something new. Not just goods, but presents. More people staying, more time spent, more reasons to return. And with each return, the place became a little more alive, a little more rooted. Markets expanded. What was once a small gathering, became a wider space, filled with goods from many lands. Cloth, spices, tools, grains, all laid out side by side, quietly showing how far the world had begun to reach. Still, nothing felt rushed. Even as these places grew, they held on to their calm. The same slow exchanges, the same quiet conversations, the same gentle rhythm of life. Growth did not disturb the stillness, it simply added to it, layer by layer. Streets formed naturally. Not planned, not forced, but shaped by movement. Where people walked often, paths became clear. Where they gathered, spaces opened. Everything followed the same soft logic as the roads themselves. Time passed, quietly. And these small places became something more. Not just stops, but centers of connection. Places where journeys met, where goods paused, where stories lingered a little longer before continuing on. Imagine now, standing at the edge of one of these growing towns. You see simple homes, small markets, travelers arriving and leaving. Nothing grand, nothing overwhelming, just a steady sense of life, gently expanding. You walk through it, slowly. The ground familiar beneath your feet, the air calm, the movement around you soft and unhurried. You can feel that this place is changing, growing, but in the same quiet way as everything else. No rush. No noise. Just time, doing its work. And as you stand there, watching this gentle growth unfold, let your thoughts drift with it, like something slowly taking shape, guided by patience, by repetition, by the endless flow of the journey itself. Now, let everything grow softer, quieter. As if the journey itself is beginning to slow. Because even the longest roads, the most traveled paths, do not remain the same forever. Over time, gently, almost unnoticed, things begin to change. The routes that were once full of footsteps, caravans, and quiet movement, begin to feel lighter. Not empty, not gone, but softer, as fewer travelers pass along them. There is no sudden ending. No moment where everything stops. Only a gradual fading, like footprints in the sand. Slowly disappearing as the wind moves across them. Some roads become less certain. Paths that were once clear, begin to blend back into the land. Grass grows where feet once walked, sand covers what was once firm ground. The road does not vanish, it simply rests, becoming part of the earth again. New paths begin to form elsewhere. Different directions, different ways of moving goods and people. The world continues to change, slowly, quietly, just as it always has. And the travelers. They follow. Not with urgency, not with resistance, but with acceptance. They adjust their journeys, take new routes, leave behind the old ones without regret. Because the road was never meant to stay the same. Even the great caravan routes, once filled with long lines of camels and steady movement, begin to feel quieter. Fewer fires at night, fewer voices, fewer footsteps echoing across the land. But still, there is peace. The silence that returns to these places is not empty. It is calm. The same calm that existed before the roads were ever walked, before trade began, before the first traveler took their first step. The land remembers. Mountains stand as they always have, watching quietly. Deserts stretch endlessly, unchanged in their stillness. The wind continues to move, brushing softly across everything, carrying away what once was, without hurry. Imagine now, walking along one of these fading paths. The ground is soft, the markings faint. You can sense that many have walked here before, but now, there is no one else in sight. Only you. And the quiet. There is no sadness in this moment. Only a gentle understanding, that everything moves, everything changes, everything finds its own time to begin, and its own time to rest. And as you stand there, on this soft, fading road, let your thoughts slow even further, like the journey itself, becoming lighter, quieter, drifting gently toward stillness. Now, let everything become still. The long roads you have followed, the deserts, the mountains, the oceans, all begin to soften, as if the journey itself is coming to rest. There is no sudden ending. No final step that changes everything. Only a quiet, gradual slowing, until the movement almost fades into stillness. The caravans that once stretched across the horizon are no longer there. The soft footsteps of merchants, the gentle rhythm of animals, the creak of carts, all have become distant memories. Like echoes that no longer return. The roads remain. But they are quiet now. Dust settles where feet once walked, the wind moves softly across empty paths, and the land returns to its natural calm, as if it has been waiting patiently all along. There are no crowds. No voices. Only space. Wide, open, and peaceful. In some places, the old paths can still be seen, faint lines across the earth, reminders of journeys that once connected distant worlds. But now, they ask nothing. They do not call travelers forward. They simply exist, gently, quietly, part of the land once more. Imagine a single traveler, walking slowly along one of these roads. Not carrying goods. Not rushing toward a destination. Just walking, for the sake of the path itself. There is no need to arrive anywhere. No need to continue. Only the calm presence of each step, one after another, fading softly into the quiet. The sky above is wide and pale, the air still, the world at rest. And as the traveler walks, even their footsteps begin to soften, until they too seem to disappear into the silence. This is not an ending filled with loss. It is an ending filled with peace. Because the journey was never about reaching a final place. It was about the movement, the connection, the quiet moments that unfolded along the way. And now, those moments rest. The roads do not vanish. They sleep. Holding within them every step, every story. Every gentle exchange that ever passed across them. So now, let your thoughts come to rest here, on these quiet, endless paths, where nothing is required, and nothing is rushed. The journey is complete. And all that remains, is calm, still, and peaceful silence. Crescent moon. Roll, you are a visual SCE.